The year is 1974. Your name is Patty Hearst. You're 19 years young, you're the granddaughter of publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, and you are one rich bitch. On this fateful night, you find yourself lounging around your apartment with your luscious fiancé, Stephen Weed, enjoying your typical nightly reading, when suddenly there's a knock at the door. Well, who could that be? Pizza?
Pizza time.
A friendly neighbor with brownies? Or pizza?
Pizza time.
A left-wing militant militia here to assault your lover and kidnap you? Nope. No, sir. It was... Wait, no, it was that last thing, actually. Yeah, no, it was, yeah. These no-good bad doers burst into your apartment harder than I burst into your mother last night, smash your fiancé in the face with a wine bottle, blindfold you, violently drag you half-naked out of your house, throw you in their van, shoot up some of the neighborhood cars for no particular reason as they peel away, and the next thing you know, you're trapped in the closet like your name was R. Kelly.
They put her in this closet that's like the size of a closet.
You stay in that closet for a week straight, hungry, blind, terrified, and confused.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
When you finally come out of the closet, like your name was James Charles, you're at long last introduced to your kidnappers. A ragtag group of left-wing urban guerrillas called the Symbionese Liberation Army, the SLA. Their ideology? Anti-fascism, anti-racism, anti-capitalism, and worst of all, pro-feminism. Basically, one look at these guys would make Ben Shapiro's head explode quicker than I did in your mother last night.
I'm Ben! Oh, yes, Daddy, give me all of it, please!
But who exactly is this SLA? And what exactly do they want with a strikingly simple, hugely humble heiress to the humongous Hearst fortune such as yourself? Well, to answer all those pressing questions of yours, we're gonna need to go back. 1973, Soledad Prison, California. 30-year-old Donald DeFreeze was serving 5 years to life for, what else? Robbing a prostitute.
It's $500 for kissing, $10,000 for snuggling. End of list.
The guy just thought he was still playing GTA, okay? It's happened to all of us. It's a very immersive gaming experience. The Donald had just been transferred to Soledad from another prison for good behavior, as he had somehow impressively managed to not rob any more prostitutes while in prison up until that point. The Donald's behavior was so good, in fact, that one sunny California day in 1973, he straight up escaped from prison, promptly fleeing the grounds, anxious to rob the first prostitute in sight. My dude just cannot quit. All right, he's got a problem. No, I'm just kidding on that one. Probably. He definitely did escape prison, though, and you may be wondering how. Well, it turns out the Donald had been diligently working his shift in the prison's boiler room, which was located, for some ungodly reason, outside of the prison walls, when he swiftly put his complex, ingenious Jimmy Neutron tier master plan into action. Now, this is complicated, so try and keep up here. You ready for this? He walked away. He just, man's just got his steps in, walking straight out of the prison. Now that's some good cardio right there, okay? Somebody ought to tell Harvey Weinstein about that. Help him lose a couple of pounds. Actually, on second thought, please don't. Please don't do that. Now, at this point, you may be saying, wow, that sounds comically easy as far as prison breaks go. And, well, yes. Yes, it was. We'll get into why exactly that may be later, but for now, the Donald is out of prison, he's on the run, and he's got some hookers to rob, okay? So, in line with that goal, he headed straight to the San Francisco Bay Area. After his arrival in the late hippie-era wasteland that was 1970s San Francisco, DeFreeze sought refuge in a commune known as Peaking House, which was, of course, named for all of the hippies currently peaking on numerous substances within the house. Soon after his arrival, though, the Donald and his associates became concerned about possible surveillance of this communal hippie home. I wonder by whom that surveillance may be coming from. And they arranged for the Donald to move in with known lesbian Patricia Soltinsky in Concord, California. I did not get that last name right at all, actually. It's Soltisic. Soltisic? Autistic. And this is where the SLA came into existence. At least Sort of. It's honestly, it's very confusing when exactly the group actually, like, formally became a thing, at least according to the official narrative, because, spoilers, the official narrative is almost certainly very wrong, and very much fabricated by, I wonder who would have guessed, right? But again, we'll get into that later. For now, all you need to know is this convicted criminal and lover of prostitute robbery was out on the streets, on the run, living with a lesbian, and the SLA was definitely, for sure, an established thing by this point. The group soon drew up a logo for their new left-wing band of urban guerrillas in the form of a 7-headed hydra. The group also, around this time, somehow came into possession of a large arsenal of firearms, complete with hollow point, cyanide-filled bullets, which I personally did not know was a thing. That kind of sounds like a bit of overkill there, you know. And also, like, it would be very hard to get your hands on for a group of underground angry hippies. I, again, wonder who might have been motivated to move large quantities of incredibly hard-to-source weaponry into the hands of a militant left-wing band of urban guerrillas led by a black man in the mid-70s. But either way, now armed to the teeth, the SLA then began plotting their first act of violent liberation. Completely and totally in line with their stated goal of toppling the racist, capitalistic patriarchy, the SLA set their sights on one Marcus Foster, the first black superintendent of any major public school system. Wait, that doesn't sound right. What? Why? What? That? How is he? What? That doesn't sound like toppling the racist capitalistic patriarchy at all. The group's stated reason for targeting Marcus was that he had, according to them, planned to introduce an identification card system for his students, a move which the group labeled as fascist and apparently a crime punishable by death. Now, pay no mind to the fact that, in reality, Marcus was actually very opposed to this measure and had actually already convinced the other members of the school board to ditch the ID requirement proposal. That is not important. Okay, fascist. As first black superintendent of a major school system after decades of segregation in America, fascist. He was a fascist, okay? That all totally adds up, and I'm certain that there were absolutely no ulterior motives from any sort of agency located in, let's say, Virginia, for example, to want a left-wing militia led by a black man to gun down another prominent and powerful left-wing black man in the 1970s. That would be insane. Why are you saying that? What are you talking about? You are insane. And you know what else would be insane? Turning down all the cash you're gonna save with today's sponsor, Rocket Money! One day, many eons ago, a young, hungry and lazy necessary information guy signed up for an Instacart subscription, used it literally one time, and has been unknowingly paying $11 for it every single month ever since. But all that changed when he discovered Rocket Money, an easy-to-use app that helps you save more and manage your money better. Now an elderly, decrepit, and crusty man with a wallet emptied from decades of paying for unneeded subscriptions, Rocket Money bestowed upon him the divine gift of sight, identifying all his subscriptions in a single organized list. From there, he simply selected the ones Rocket Money could help him cancel and slayed the metaphorical beast of unnecessary monthly spending with just a few taps. This is amazing! The sheer, unending joy of his newfound savings caused the frail, informed man to lapse into a trance, where he was given tantric visions of Rocket Money, automatically scanning his bills to find savings, negotiating said bills for him, and giving him the best possible rate on everything from internet service to cable and phone bills, along with tons of other awesome features that saved the old man even more money. And when the man finally awoke with an ancient burp, he discovered these dreams were a reality the whole time, all within the Rocket Money app. And thankfully, my friend, you too can save more and spend less, and join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today by going to rocketmoney.com/necessary information or clicking the link in the description to get started for free. Go down, click the link, and save money like me. Oh, I'm so rich. On November 6th, 1973, the group put their plan into action by gunning down Marcus as he was leaving an Oakland school board meeting with those cyanide-packed bullets, leaving him very, very dead. Now, the group had assumed that, as they said, Marcus was a fascist, a black fascist at that this move would definitely, totally for sure, garner them support from the black community and help them enlist new black members to the SLA militia. However, it turns out, and this is quite surprising, to give them some credit here, that when you murder in cold blood the first black superintendent of a major school system after decades of racial segregation in America for a proposal that he actively, provably, and publicly opposed, black people, apparently, don't like that very much at all, actually. And this move heavily angered other black and leftist groups who immediately distanced themselves very, very far away from the SLA after their killing of Marcus. Now, again, if you're thinking that this all sounds, strange, that something doesn't quite add up about all this, that there seems to be some shit floating in the proverbial punch bowl here, me too, buddy. But just remember the, topic and title of the video that you're watching here. Just keep that in mind, and we'll talk about it later. And at this point, I haven't come up with a title, so I'm sure hoping that it involves the CIA for that to work. But if not, the CIA is what I'm talking about. Now, Robert Blackburn, the dude who took over for Marcus as acting superintendent, who was white, by the way, and had just a very unfortunate last name there for the white guy who replaced the first major black superintendent in the entire country after he was suspiciously gunned down under incredibly fishy circumstances. That is just quite on the nose there. Mr. Blackburn said about the SLA after they gunned down his predecessor, quote, "These were not political radicals. They were uniquely mediocre and stunningly off base. The people in the SLA had no grounding in history. They swung from the world of being thumb-in-the-mouth cheerleaders to self-described," I don't know why I'm giving this guy a New York accent, "my fried chicken now." They swung from the world of being thumb-in-the-mouth cheerleaders to self-described revolutionaries with nothing but rhetoric to support them. But in slightly better news, 2 months after this event, 2 members of the SLA were arrested and charged with the killing of Marcus Foster, their names being one Russell Little and Joseph Ramiro. And as they sat rotting in jail, the rest of the SLA stayed busy cooking up their next plot.
Let the little rat cook.
Presumably, the group was all sitting around their compound one day, just puffing away on the devil's cabbage and complaining about our corrupt capitalist overlords while debating what to do next. Man, these rich, racist, fascist fat cats are really getting under my skin, man. This is all just so damn jive. I know, but what are we gonna do about it? Well, we could kill Rosa Parks. That would really stick it to the white man. No, that's not big enough. Well, how about popping a cap in Martin Luther King Jr.? Dude, the FBI already did that like 6 years ago, man. Damn it! Those guys are too quick. Okay, well, how about, and hear me out on this, guys, all right? How about this time we target someone who, I don't know, actually makes some small amount of sense in the context of our whole freeing the common man from the shackles of our capitalist bourgeois overlords thing that we got going on. Interesting idea, Donald. I don't really think that would work. I'm pretty sure our current trajectory of killing prominent black rights activists is definitely the best way to fight the power, but okay. We can, sure, yeah, let's give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? Well, dynamite, man. Dynamite. What is this shit? Blueberry headband? It's that purple nurple haze. That purple nurple haze. Good choice. Solid choice. So the group decided to target prolific anti-communist, union-busting fat cat, founder of the largest monopolistic newspaper, magazine, newsreel, and film business in the world, and guy who basically single-handedly made marijuana illegal because hemp was bad for his paper business, William Randolph Hearst. The one singular issue with that is that he had already been dead for like 20 years at that point. So they decided to do the next best thing and kidnap his granddaughter. After one SLA member read a copy of the San Francisco Chronicle that had announced Patty's engagement to her fiance Stephen Weed, an article that published their actual real address publicly in their paper for some reason, just absolutely doxed the shit out of this woman, the group decided to pay a trip to her apartment, and we already know what happened from there. Knockety knock, Blindfold, closet. Okay, we're all caught up now. Patty Hearst comes out of the closet like she was Little Nas X, meets the SLA, blah, 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 and the group then sits her down in front of a tape recorder and tells her to speak in the first of several recordings, which, in the traditional Western communist style of making everything sound as fancy and foreign as possible, they referred to as a tape communique. Okay, guys, editor Evan here. So there's gonna be, I think, like 5 or 6 times that I play these tapes, and I'm gonna play them pretty much in their entirety, as much as I was able to get my hands on, and I think they're pretty interesting. So feel free to listen to all of them if you also think they're interesting. But I also recognize that, like me, many people have a terrible attention span. So you are totally able to just skip past them, my guy. You are so allowed to do that. What you're not allowed to do is click off of the video. So just skip past them. Just skip past them if you want to. They don't provide any context that you are gonna absolutely not be able to understand the video without. Okay, so just skip them if your brain is bad like mine. Okay, let's get into it.
Mom, Dad, I'm okay. I had a few scrapes and stuff, but I washed them up and they're getting okay. And I've caught a cold, but they're giving me pills for it. And so I'm not being starved or beaten or unnecessarily frightened. I've heard some press reports, and so I know that Steve and all the neighbors are okay, that no one was really hurt. And I also know that the SLA members here are very upset about press distortions of what's been happening, that they've not been shooting down helicopters or shooting down innocent people in the streets. I'm kept blindfolded, usually, so that I can't identify anyone. And I think you can tell that I'm not really terrified or anything. You know, I'm okay. I was very upset, though, to hear about the police rushing in on that house in Oakland, and I was just really glad that I wasn't there. And I would appreciate it if everyone would just calm down and not try to find me and not be making identifications, because they're not only endangering me, but they're endangering themselves. I'm with a combat unit that's armed with automatic weapons, and there's no way that I will be released until they let me go. So it wouldn't do any good for somebody to come in here and try to get me out by force. These people aren't just a bunch of nuts. They've been really honest with me, but they're perfectly willing to die for what they're doing. And I want to get out of here, but the only way I'm going to is if we do it their way. And I just hope that you'll do what they say, Dad, and just do it quickly. I'm not being forced to say any of this. I think it's really important that you take their request very seriously about not arresting any other SLA members. I just want to get out of here and see everyone again and be back with Steve. The SLA is very interested in seeing how you're taking this, Dad, and they want to make sure that you are really serious and listening to what they're saying. And they think that you've been taking this whole thing a lot more seriously than the police and the FBI and other federal people have been taking it. It's really up to you to make sure that these people don't jeopardize my life by charging in and doing stupid things. And I hope that you'll make sure that they don't do anything else like that Oakland house business. The SLA has ideological ties with the IRA, the people's struggle in the Philippines, and the socialist people in Puerto Rico and their struggle for independence, and they consider themselves to be soldiers who are fighting and aiding these people. I am a prisoner of war, and so are the 2 men in San Quentin. I'm being treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention, and one of the conditions being that I'm not being tried for crimes which I'm not responsible for. I'm here because I'm a member of a ruling class family, and I think you can begin to see the analogy. The people in the 2 men in San Quentin are being held and are going to be tried simply because they are members of the SLA and not because they've done anything. Witnesses to the shooting of Foster saw a black man, and 2 white men have been arrested for this. You're being told this so that you'll understand why I was kidnapped, and so that you'll understand that whatever happens to the 2 prisoners is going to happen to me. You have to understand that I am held to be innocent the same way that 2 men in San Quentin are innocent, that they are simply members of a group, have not actually done anything themselves to warrant their arrest. They apparently were part of an intelligence unit and have never executed anyone themselves. The SLA has declared war against the government, and it's important that you realize that this is not considered by them to be just a simple kidnapping, and that you don't treat it that way and say, oh, well, I don't know why she was taken. I'm telling you now why this happened so that you'll know and so that you'll have something to use, some knowledge to try to get me out of here. And in Kuwait, the commandos negotiated the release of their hostages and they left the country. Go on.
The militia then issued an ultimatum to the rest of the incredibly wealthy Hearst family that they would release Patty Hearst in exchange for the release of those 2 SLA members who had been arrested for killing Marcus Foster, Ramiro and Little, to which the authorities promptly responded, no. I'm sorry, what? No, we're not going to do that. Yes, the FBI really just said, ha ha, ha 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 ha. James, you gotta hear this. They want us to release their buddies. Yeah, from jail. I know, ha 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 ha. Then, wiping tears from their eyes, they told the group to go suck eggs. Meanwhile, Patty's parents, Randolph and Catherine, emerged out of the Hearst cave to speak to the press in a public statement about the kidnapping, with Patty's mother wearing a certain black dress, which a surprising number of people, for some reason, took to mean that they had already kind of, like, accepted their daughter's death or some shit, like it was funeral garb or something.
She's like, Mom, take off that dumb black dress. It's not helping anything. You're embarrassing us. Like, I'm not dead. I'm alive. And I feel that what you're doing is wrong with being a rich person, and I am here to be part of the people. Of the people.
Honestly, I really do not know what was going on there, but it was mentioned quite a bit. In any case, after the event, the SLA soon sat Patty down again to make their second tape communique.
Dad, Mom, I'm making this tape to let you know that I'm still okay. Also, I would like to emphasize that I am alive, and that I am well, and that in spite of what certain tape experts seem to think, I'm fine. It's really depressing, though, to hear people talk about me like I'm dead. I can't explain what that's like. What it does also is that it begins to convince other people that maybe I am dead. And when everybody is convinced that I am dead, well, then it gives the FBI an excuse to come in here and try to pull me out.
After this, the SLA decides, well, we've already gone through the trouble of kidnapping this rich bitch into our possession here. If the man won't let our buddies out of jail for her, we might as well get something out of this, and they quickly sent out some new demands to the Hearst family. The SLA wanted the Hearsts to, quote, feed every poor person in California.
Mom, Dad, I'm okay. But I need you to feed every poor person.
Demanding $70 worth of food to be given to every needy Californian, a task that was calculated to require an investment of $400 million. The Hearst family heard these demands and soon said, okay, f***ers, make it $2 million. The SLA said bet, and soon the hostage-negotiated Hearst-sponsored San Francisco food distribution program began. Now, this program, surprisingly, did not feed every poor person in California, as was requested, and it did not go very well at all, actually. Yes, some poor people did in fact get some free food. That's neat. Whoopee. But there was also some extreme violence and mayhem that went down at the food distribution sites as well, with massive hungry crowds physically assaulting each other, beating people down for their free meals, several food trucks just straight up being burglarized of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of food, and a lot of said food just ending up destroyed, ruined, or spoiled during the ensuing poorly planned havoc. Eventually, these food distribution workers just resorted to basically doing mealtime drive-bys by just throwing the food out of their still moving trucks directly into the massive crowds, which apparently consisted of a much larger horde of hungry homeless hippies clamoring for a free lunch than originally expected, which went pretty much exactly as you'd expect, with these workers basically forcing San Francisco's poor to have a Purge-style Superdome battle brawl over these tossed meals, at least the ones that didn't just get immediately ruined from landing in a puddle of mud, blood, or human feces, or getting trampled on during the ensuing literal food fight, which injured very, very many people. So after this flamboyantly failed food fiasco, the SLA produced a third recording. The group was sending all of these recordings to a local radio station to play publicly, by the way.
If you're thinking about changing the station, ouch!
That's how the hearse and everyone else with a radio signal heard them, for that matter. And in this tape, Patty said,
Mom, Dad, I've received the message you broadcast last Sunday. It was good to hear from you after so much silence. Your silence has definitely jeopardized my safety. I
because it allows the FBI to continue to attempt to find me. I'm beginning to feel that the FBI would rather that I get killed than safely released. I've been hearing reports about the feed program. So far, it sounds like most of the food is low quality. No one received any beef or lamb. Anyway, it certainly didn't sound like the kind of food our family is used to eating.
Mom, Dad, there was no beef or lamb. That's not the kind of food that you should be giving the poor people. That food sucked.
I don't believe that you are doing everything you can. I don't believe that you're doing anything at all. You said that it was out of your hands. What you should have said is that you wash your hands of it. The SLA wants to feed the people, and I know you could have done it the way the SLA asked. I mean, I know that we have enough money. I've heard reports gathered by the SLA on the FBI, and it's now overt attempts to set me up for execution. By attempting to raid the site where I'm being held, and then discredit the SLA by saying that they were the ones who killed me. Because of these dangers, I have been transferred to a special security unit of the SLA combat forces, where I'm being held in protective custody. I've been issued a 12-gauge riot shotgun, and I've been receiving instructions on how to use it. In the event of an attack by the FBI, I've been told that I will be given an issue of cyanide buckshot in order to protect myself, because it is the Federation's opinion, and my own from observation, that if the FBI does rush in, it will obviously be doing this against the wishes of my family and in total disregard for my safety. In fact, they would be doing it to murder me. I really want to get out of here, and I really want to get home alive. I'm appealing to the public and asking them not to assist the FBI in their investigation. Doing so is simply helping to dig my grave. I no longer fear the SLA because they are not the ones who want me to die. I realize now it is the FBI who wants to murder me.
Now, this tape, but probably the most inflammatory yet, definitely a palpable vibe change there, with Patty Hearst herself saying that she's going to treat the feds like how they treat other people's dogs by blowing them to bits with cyanide buckshot. Which, of course, kind of based, and of course, again, a weird weapon to have, especially for a ragtag group of leftist hooligans. And after hearing this tape, a bunch of people in the public, as they had been saying with all the tapes to this point, were claiming that Patty must have been forced to say these things. There's just no way that she could really have sympathy for her kidnappers, have really come to see their side of things, and genuinely liked what she saw. Well, in direct response to these accusations, the SLA released yet another taped communique, the most shocking and scandalous one thus far.
I would like to begin this statement by informing the public that I wrote what I'm about to say. It's what I feel. I've never been forced to say anything on any tape, nor have I been brainwashed, drugged, tortured, hypnotized, or in any way confused. Stephen, I've changed, grown. I've become conscious and can never go back to the life we led before. Love doesn't mean the same thing to me anymore. My love has expanded as a result of my experiences to embrace all people. A love that comes from the knowledge that no one is free until we are all free. I've been given the choice of 1, being released in a safe area, or 2, joining the forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army and fighting for my freedom and the freedom of all oppressed people. I have chosen to stay and fight. One thing which I have learned is that the corporate ruling class will do anything in their power in order to maintain their position of control over the masses, even if this means the sacrifice of one of their own. It should be obvious that people who don't even care about their own children couldn't possibly care about anyone else's children. The things which are precious to these people are their money and power, and they will never willingly surrender either. I've been given the name Tanya, after a comrade who fought alongside Che in Bolivia for the people of Bolivia. I embrace the name with the determination to continue fighting with her spirit. Patria muerte, venceremos.
That's correct. If these tapes are to be believed as Patty's genuine words and feelings, it means that her captors gave her the choice to escape, to be set free like a wet fart bursting from the prison that is a Taco Bell consumer's prolapsed anus, and instead, she refused and chose to join her urban guerrilla comrades and fight for her right to partay. Who is writing this? It's me. It's me writing this. Why am I allowed to write this? Who's still letting me write these? The SLA also released this admittedly kind of badass photo of Patty posing with a big old Fed Blaster 9000 in front of the SLA flag, looking like a true militant left-wing comrade, which, again, gotta say, kind of based, just a little based. So at this point, people were really starting to throw around the term Stockholm Syndrome here. a proposed mental condition or delirium of contested legitimacy, which poses that certain individuals, when kidnapped, held against their will, trapped in an abusive relationship, or who find themselves trapped in any sort of situation with a huge power imbalance that is not in their favor, may actually start to empathize and sympathize with their captors, and even develop a love for them, in some cases, in an attempt to sort of mentally cope with their lack of power situation. These people are really huffing that kidnapping copium, just taking in a deep breath. The FBI estimates that about 8% of kidnapping victims will develop some form of Stockholm Syndrome, and the syndrome itself gets its name from a 1973 armed robbery in Stockholm, Sweden, a robbery that took place at a bank with the most Swedish name I've ever heard, Kreditbanken. That said, incredibly Swedish Kreditbanken, these meatball-scented robbers held 4 hostages captive for 6 days straight, and according to the hostages, they apparently were so appalled by how the police were handling their situation that they started to see the cops as the ones who were putting their lives in jeopardy, more so even than their own captors. Because the police were failing so aggressively and in such an epic fashion to negotiate with the robbers, the hostages had to attempt to negotiate for their lives themselves, and perceived the robbers as acting more reasonably than the actual police in this situation. The hostages developed such strong and persistent feelings toward their captors, in fact, that after the whole ordeal was over, all 4 of them refused to testify against the robbers in court, and even started raising money for the criminal defense team to try and get them off the hook for the robbery and for taking them hostage. The Stockholm Syndrome term was then coined by a Swedish criminologist and psychologist who the police brought in to try and explain to them what in the herring-flavored was going on here, although not originally under the Stockholm name. The psychologist originally dubbed it, oh God. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, you can do this, Evan. You got this, buddy. I believe in you. Normalsturgst syndrome. This title was originally given to the ailment after the specific place in Stockholm where the robbery went down, instead of the whole city. But because no one that isn't an IKEA-dwelling Viking or PewDiePie can say that, everyone just started calling it Stockholm Syndrome, the much more pronounceable Stockholm Syndrome. Anyway, as this sweaty Swedish robbery had just happened only a year prior to Patty Hearst making this tape in 1974, the whole case was quite fresh on everyone's minds, and people began claiming that Patty Hearst was the most recent victim of this hot, trendy new Stockholm Syndrome invented after that Kreditbanken robbery. And speaking of bank robberies, April 15th, 1974, 10 a.m., Hibernia Bank, San Francisco. The doors of the bank fly open as the SLA storms in, along with Patty Hearst herself, in the flesh, this time holding a fucking machine gun Fed Blaster 9000 and loudly demanding everyone get the fuck on the ground, not tomorrow, not in 10 minutes, but right the fuck now. Patty was directly quoted as screaming during the robbery, "I'm Tanya! Up! Up! Up against the wall, motherfuckers!"
My new name is Tanya. Get the down.
Yeah, this whole Tanya thing was very important to her, okay? She led with that, even before informing people that she will kill them if they don't get on the floor. Which, that must have been so confusing for everyone just trying to make a deposit in there that day. Like, who? What? Who the is Tanya? Why are you telling us your name? I just wanted a cashier's check. None of these SLA robbers wore masks, and the whole event was fully captured on CCTV, which the group knew about, as they had specifically chosen this bank because they knew it had cameras and that the media would just go absolutely balls to the wall cuckoo crazy with this footage.
Patty Hearst, where is she? What's happening?
And go absolutely balls to the wall cuckoo crazy they did, that darn media.
If we're gonna talk about sex, I'd love to hit some of the fine points of technique.
As the video of Patty Tanya Hearst herself swinging a gun around and robbing a f***ing bank was the biggest news. It was the biggest news. This shit was insane. In the end, the SLA ended up leaving with more than $10,000, and 2 very unlucky bankgoers were shot during this robbery. They did survive, though, I think. Don't quote me on that. I think they did. I hope so, or else this tone is not as appropriate. So I'm gonna say they did.
Greetings to the people. This is Tanya. On April 15th, my comrades and I expropriated $10,660.02 from the Sunset branch of the Hibernia Bank. Casualties could have been avoided had the persons involved cooperated with the People's Forces and kept out of the way until after our departure. I was positioned so that I could hold customers and bank personnel who were on the floor. My gun was loaded, and at no time did any of my comrades intentionally point their guns at me. Careful examination of the photographs, which were published, clearly shows this is true. Our action of April 15th forced the corporate state to help finance the revolution. As for my ex-fiancé, I don't care if I'll ever see him again. During the last few months, Stephen has shown himself to be a sexist, ageist pig. Not that this was a sudden change from the way he always was. For those people who still believe that I'm brainwashed or dead, I see no reason to further defend my position. Consciousness is terrifying to the ruling class, and they will do anything to discredit people who have realized that the only alternative to freedom is death, and that the only way we can free ourselves of this fascist dictatorship is by fighting, not with words, but with guns. I am a soldier in the People's Army. Patria o muerte, venceremos.
So now the SLA had a little bit of money in their pocket, as successfully robbing a bank tends to lead to.
Money! 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 Money!
But they decided that, one, they needed more members in their pocket as well, and two, the metaphorical heat in San Francisco was getting way too metaphorically hot after this bank robbery, and they needed to get the f*** out of the metaphorical kitchen, if you know what I'm saying.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
Plus, as far as trying to get new members around the San Francisco Bay Area went, literally no one wanted to do that, to join the SLA, because they were all still really pissed off at them for shooting that black superintendent, Marcus Foster. And they generally just thought that the SLA were huge idiots, doo-doo heads of the highest order, and they wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. So, because of that, it was time to move someplace where radical black and leftist groups were less aware of the fact that these guys had fewer brain cells than Forrest Gump after a botched lobotomy. So the group decided to flee to DeFreeze's former neighborhood in the godforsaken city of Los Angeles, where he convinced some of his old friends to join the SLA and where they could all just lay low and chill for a while. And in the spirit of laying low and chilling, they then decided to get into another entirely unnecessary, highly public armed conflict, as one naturally does in that situation. Two SLA members entered Mel's Sporting Goods in Inglewood to acquire some, well, sporting goods. Goods for sporting. Needed some jock straps, some wiffle ball bats, who knows. In the process of acquiring said sporting goods, one of the members attempted to put the old 5-finger discount on a bandolier, which is basically a fanny pack for bullets, and when a security guard confronted him about this, he said, "Oh, a security guard is confronting me."
And so I pull out my gun!
The SLA member quickly whipped out his revolver, and this big, swinging-dicked, Paul Blart-esque security guard, completely unfazed, having a full-blown Viet Cong rage-fueled flashback, managed to knock the gun out of his goddamn hand and handcuff the guy's left wrist. Meanwhile, Patty Hearst herself was sitting in a van across the street on armed lookout when she saw the scuffle ensue and started using the store's overhead sign as target practice, firing her gun at the sign and causing a panic, which allowed both of the SLA members inside the store to run out and jump in the van, which immediately peeled the out of there. At some point, the merry gang of guerrillas decided to ditch the van, which the police quickly discovered abandoned, where the cops soon found one teeny-weeny piece of evidence that spelled doom for the SLA, as it does for all mortal men.
Unpaid parking tickets.
These parking tickets just straight up had the actual goddamn address of the group's hideout printed right there on the front in the Queen's English, not unsimilar to the address of Patty Hearst in that San Francisco newspaper, which ironically gave the cops, a pretty good lead as to where to look for the group next. But in Exhibit 10,000,000,001 of the corporate media ruining literally everything.
Yesterday, yes, I had a nice lunch at Taco Bell. Cost me about $28.
Wait a minute. You spent $28 at Taco Bell for just yourself?
For lunch.
Everyone inside the SLA safe house quickly saw news of the sports goods store shooting and promptly fled the compound before busting in and commandeering a random house at 1466 East 54th Street. Yes, they really just kicked down the door of some random home and said, "Hey, nice house you got here. Gimme, we live here now," which, upon further reflection, may unironically be the solution to this nation's housing crisis.
The house is free! It's a free house.
It's free real estate.
A 17-year-old neighbor to the owners of this house, named Brenda Daniels, was sleeping on their couch when the SLA busted in. And she said of this very chill, laid-back event, quote,
I went down to Minnie's every Thursday evening to play some cards and drink a little. I fell asleep early, and when I woke up around 2 a.m., I saw 4 white women and 3 dudes, 2 black and 1 white. I saw guns spread out all over the floor, and I asked them why they had guns more than I'd ever seen in my life. They didn't answer, and instead, the black dude asked me my name and then introduced me to everyone.
When Brenda, a black woman, was asked if she saw Patty Hearst when she woke up in her house, she responded in the best possible way, saying, quote,
Man, how can I tell? All white women look the same to me.
Which, I need that embroidered on a pillow. Somehow, the family of the home's owners, who were out of the house at the time, found out that they had been bamboozled by boomstick-brandishing burglars who had completely commandeered their couch, commode, and common areas, quickly called the police, and gave them the address. Soon afterward, more than 400 armed LAPD officers stormed onto the scene to arrest the 6 SLA members, and in the tradition of the LAPD, completely bungled the situation in quite a spectacular fashion, or at least that's what they want you to think. You'll see what I mean in a bit about that. And to be fair, you know, it's not exactly a hard bridge to sell that the LAPD royally f***ed up a critical operation for the gazillionth time that week. That is a convincing argument. In addition to the 400 members of the Los Angeles Pig Department, the cops were soon joined by several more FBI agents, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, a SWAT team, the California Highway Patrol, which, not the highway that this was occurring on, does not really feel like your jurisdiction there, pal, but go off, queen. And finally, the Los Angeles Fire Department, which would, soon come in handy. And it's also interesting, upon further reflection, that they already, from the jump, had the fire department there on the scene before anything even went down. That's actually, that's quite an interesting note. Definitely keep that in mind. So after this fucking Roman Armada tier super force showed up to arrest these 6 people, the leader of the SWAT team turned on his bullhorn and proclaimed,
Occupants of 1466 East 54th Street. This is the Los Angeles Police Department speaking. Come out with your hands up.
This order then led to one older man and a young child coming out hands firmly in the air, with the man telling the police that no one else was inside the house, which I find pretty funny, hypothetically, that there's like 500 officers, the highway patrol for some reason, and a SWAT team outside, and they're just gonna be like, oh, what's that old timer? There's no one in the house. Hey, this one old dude said there's no one in the house, guys. False alarm, pack it up, let's go bowling. Just without checking anything at all. But unfortunately for the cops, they would have to wait just a bit longer to completely clear out the inventory of every donut shop in a 10-mile radius, because the young child that had come out with the old man, being the dirty little snitch that he was, informed the police that this stinky old was in fact capping, and that there was actually a shit ton of people in the house, and that they were all fucking armed as The leader of the SWAT team then told this young boy to watch his language and to stay in school, before immediately launching tear gas inside the house to smoke out the SLA inside. And I just want to emphasize that these cops did not know if Patty Hearst was in there at this time. Okay, they're just wildin' over here. Patty Hearst, Schmatty Burst. We're the LAPD, goddammit. You think we care about human lives? Smoke up that house like Snoop Dogg was in it, boys. Happy hours in 10 minutes. We gotta wrap this shit up.
The overpowering amount of tear gas filled the air and sickened everyone.
I can't. Man, I know how you feel.
The SLA inside responded to the gas attack with a barrage of fully automatic machine gun fire toward the horde of police, to which the officers responded in kind, with the situation quickly escalating into a full-blown shootout, complete with the SLA throwing out what the cops called homemade grenades that the militia had somehow cooked up using 35mm film canisters.
They had 35mm film cans with C4 fused, and they threw those out because we'd hear boom.
As the cops continued to shoot up the house with their guns, they also continued to fire round after round of tear gas canisters through the windows, apparently launching dozens of them inside the house during the firefight, and at some point, the explosion caused by one of these canisters turned said firefight into a well, a much more literal one.
Law enforcement decided to throw more tear gas into the house, which touched off the large amount of ammunition inside.
Chemical agent smoke is white. When we put the chemical agents in the back, black smoke came out. Fire erupts.
Police were surprised to receive return fire, even as the house erupted in flames.
Soon after the fire started, 2 women ran out of the back of the house, and another woman, who reports say had come into the house drunk the previous night, passed out, and then woke up in the middle of the armed siege, groggily stumbled her way out of the front of the house. The cops immediately arrested all 3 of these women, but later found out that none of them were actually SLA members. Just, a drunk woman inside of a burning house. It happens all the time, okay? This is California. As the cops continued shooting into the now absolute fireball that was this house, 2 actual female members of the SLA did come out the front before immediately being shot dead by the police. The remaining SLA members inside the burning wreckage eventually succumbed to smoke inhalation, burns, or gunshot wounds, with Donald DeFries, the leader of the group, apparently administering himself with the old Adolf Cobain treatment, a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. And fortunately, no one else, law enforcement or civilian, died during this event, despite the debacle becoming one of the largest shootouts in United States history, with over 9,000 rounds of ammunition being fired by both the police and the SLA.
We ran out of ammunition, and so
we ran out of ammunition?
Oh, yes. I think Albert fired more rounds than anybody, and I think he had 594 rounds.
I ran out of ammunition in 5 minutes.
And this fire-fueled was decimating to the SLA, with all their main leaders dying in the shootout, and many more later found dead in a crawl space under the home, which had burned down around them. However, there was one particular Patty person not discovered in the wreckage, one Mrs. Hurst herself. It turns out that while the firefight was going down, Hurst was holed up with 2 other SLA members in a hotel in Anaheim. They must have just been taking a little vacay to Disneyland, I assume. Maybe Universal Orlando, who's to say? The facts are still out on that one for now. Patty managed to escape back to San Francisco, with the few remaining SLA members not turned into crispy leftist gorilla-flavored jerky bites, where they then robbed yet another bank, shooting and killing one of the customers in the process, before finally being captured more than a year after the fiery shootout in September of 1975. Patty Hearst immediately flipped on the whole being super down with communism and armed left-wing militias stuff, saying that the group had indeed manipulated her, threatened to kill her several times, brainwashed her with LSD a la Charles Manson, and forced her to rob those poor banks, the poor little banky wankies. Despite her defense attorney's claims of brainwashing, however, Patty was actually sentenced to 7 years for that original bank robbery. However, after serving just 2, limp, overcooked noodle penis having President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence to time served and released her, and she was later fully pardoned by this nation's first black president, Bill Clinton.
Do you think Bill Clinton was our first black president?
I would have to, investigate more, Bill's dancing abilities before I accurately judged whether he was in fact a brother.
Now, something that goes a bit against her claims of being forced into literally all of her actions here, robbing a bank, shooting at a sporting goods sign herself to protect her so-called captors, etc., is her final tape recorded 104 days after her kidnapping, in which she said,
I want to talk about the way I knew our 6 murdered comrades, because the fascist pig media has, of course, been painting a typically distorted picture of these beautiful sisters and brothers. Sim Q loved the people with tenderness and respect. He helped me see that it's not how long we live that's important, it's how we live. Jelena was beautiful. She exploded with the desire to kill the pigs. She taught me how to fight the enemy within through her constant struggle with bourgeois conditioning. Gabi practiced until her shotgun was an extension of her right and left arms. She taught me the patience and discipline necessary for survival and victory. Zoya, female gorilla, perfect love and perfect hate reflected in stone-cold eyes. Faisa was a beautiful sister who taught me to shoot first and make sure the pig is dead before splitting, and I'll always love her. Cujo was the gentlest, most beautiful man I've ever known. Neither Cujo or I had ever loved an individual the way we loved each other. Our relationship's foundation was our commitment to the struggle and our love for the people. It's because of this that I still feel strong and determined to fight. I died in that fire on 54th Street, but out of the ashes I was reborn. I know what I have to do. Our comrades didn't die in vain. The pig lies about the advisability of surrender have only made me more determined. I renounced my class privilege when Sin and Cujo gave me the name Tanya. While I have no death wish, I have never been afraid of death. For this reason, the brainwashed arrest theory of the pig hearse has always amused me. Life is very precious to me, but I have no delusions that going to prison will keep me alive, and I would never choose to live the rest of my life surrounded by pigs like the Hearsts. Death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people.
Which, this was taken after most of the SLA had perished in that house fire, certainly all the big boys. But, you know, she still was with some of the SLA at that point, and those words certainly sound awful chummy to me. And she also helped the group flee to the East Coast and around the country using her own personal contacts after the fire. So, I mean, is it impossible that she was forced to do literally all of that, given this evidence? Technically speaking, no. But some evidence we will see later might make that conclusion just a bit more unlikely than it already is. The rest of the SLA members were eventually all rounded up and given prison sentences of various lengths as well. However, since most of the main mega bad boys, like Donald DeFreeze, had already died in that fire, which, once again, quite ironic given his last name there, only one SLA member was given a sentence long enough to still be in jail to this day, Joseph Ramiro, one of the shooters who killed that black superintendent, Marcus Foster. The other shooter, Richard Little,
Chicken Little,
actually had his conviction overturned 7 years after the murder and was later fully acquitted, wiping his record clean as well. So that's something. What's up with that? So what a fun, lighthearted tale that was, folks, huh? And now for the ever-present question, what in the Sam hell did the CIA have to do with this? It's a great question, my favorite question. And now let's find out, shall we? As with all the other entries in this bottom, most schizophrenic tier of the iceberg, the CIA's involvement in this case is technically only a theory, okay? Nothing's been formally proven at this point, so take everything with a grain of salt, but I will say that the evidence for this one, in my humble, somewhat educated opinion, quite a bit stronger than most of the other entries in this particular tier, all right? And certainly more so than that last video I did about terrible, no good, bad, stinky, not a person monster, Mark Dutroux, which you should check out along with the rest of the iceberg after watching this video and subscribing if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
I am currently hitting the gritty for Ukraine.
So it's the 1960s, okay? Just picture it. The boomers are young. They're f***ing, they're dirty, they're hippies. It's a weird time, okay? Everyone's muddy and they think they're gonna get nuked at any second by the Russians. Nobody knows what the f*** is going on. Everyone's doing acid, kids, in the CIA, it's crazy. And back in the 60s, America, California in particular, the San Francisco Bay Area and even more particular, was going a bit, to once again use the clinical term, balls to the wall, cuckoo nuts brazy. There were protests, riots, hippies as far as the eye can see. It was absolutely disgusting. At least, that's how sitting president and known lover of whipping his dick out Lyndon B. Johnson certainly saw it.
He's pulling his cock out! Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
To learn more about the dick whipping aspect of that particular president, go check out this video by a kind of a cringe YouTuber. Necessary something or other is the channel name. I don't know. He kind of sucks, but the video's all right. So
where was Lyndon Baines Johnson's penis during the Kennedy assassination?
Anyway, Lyndon Baines Johnson, or LBJ, was pretty darn peeved about all the protests popping up around his country, catalyzed by the college protests in places like Berkeley, California, mostly spurred on by America's famous family-friendly, happy fun time that everyone was super supportive of, the Vietnam War, which of course LBJ shoved us into harder than the slow kid at the middle school pool party, with the popular slogan, yelled by long-haired greasy men and women with armpit hair everywhere, being, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids can you build today?"
Flying low across the trees, pilots doing what they please, dropping frags on refugees, napalm sticks to kids. CIA with guns for hire, mountain yards around a fire. Napalm makes that fire higher. Napalm sticks to kids. Attack some kids when you go downtown by throwing some candy on the ground and grease them when they gather around. Napalm sticks to kids. 18 kids in a no-fire zone, puts under arms and going home. Last in line goes home alone. Napalm sticks to kids. See the little kids jump and shout, drop some napalm without a doubt. Watch them try and put it out. Napalm sticks to kids. They's in good shape for the shape they's in, but there's no way that they can win with napalm rolling down their skin. Napalm sticks to kids.
It's catchy, right?
Wrong!
Not quite as catchy as this song, though.
Oh my God, I will vote. I will vote. For Donald Trump.
Oh my God, I will vote. I will vote for Donald Trump.
Oh my God, I will vote. I'm filming this on November 5th, 2024, by the way. I'm not kidding. I'm very scared. You know what happened. I don't know what happened. I know what happened when you're watching. I do not know what's going to happen right now. And I've had that song stuck in my head for like 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
Anyway, obviously LBJ absolutely had to do something about this, right? It was none of those greasy hippies' business the exact number of kids he had killed that day, damn it. What goes on in a man's bedroom is his own goddamn business, he proclaimed with his little Jumbo Johnson firmly outside of his pants flapping in the wind. And LBJ wasn't the only one annoyed by what then Governor of California and jelly bean connoisseur Ronald Reagan dubbed the so-called New Left.
I don't like the way President Reagan's running his country.
During his governorship, Reagan made several, let's just call them concerning statements about the political protests, particularly what was happening on the Berkeley campus at that time, saying he would lead a formal investigation into the, quote, and I'm not kidding, this is a direct quote, campus malcontents and filthy speech advocates. Yes, those conniving leftists and their advocation of filthy speech. 3 cheers for the Republican Party, folks. The free speech defenders hard at work here.
Reagan smash! Reagan smash! Reagan sleepy.
Soon before his second term as California governor, Reagan, according to Tom O'Neill, author of the amazing book Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s, declared a literal war on the New Left movement, saying, again, direct quote, "If it takes a bloodbath, let's get it over with. No more appeasement."
We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics, and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
So that's fun. Very inspiring words from the Gipper there. So to deal with these college protests, these filthy left-wing groups within the US, the threat to his administration, and the threat to America and democracy itself as he saw it, LBJ, along with the heads of the FBI and the CIA, created the FBI's COINTELPRO and the CIA's Operation Chaos. Now, these are some very crucial operations in many of the entries in this last tier, and I will talk much more in depth about both of them in my next award-winning video on the CIA, where I plan on tying together the grand narrative behind the theories of the CIA's connection to Charles Manson, Henry Lee Lucas, and MKUltra, along with the so-called domestic Phoenix program. But for now, as it relates to the SLA, this is what you need to know about COINTELPRO and Operation Chaos. That video's gonna take like the most research I've ever done on anything in my life, by the way, so don't expect it quite anytime soon. Next video is probably going to be part 2 on the Florida Man tier list. A little silly palate cleanser for you there before we jump back into the CIA just being absolute filthy, goofy goobers. But anyway, the many tangents I've gone on in the last 5 minutes aside, the stated goals of both Chaos and COINTELPRO were to discredit the left-wing movement in America by, to quote from Tom O'Neill again, any means necessary. And they sure took any means very literally there. Operation Chaos was a secret, covert operation in which the CIA operated on domestic soil. A very big and very illegal no-no for them, but Of course, when have the boys in Langley ever been concerned with silly little things like laws or morality? They elevated themselves above those mortal restraints when their third eyes were opened by secretly dosing each other with LSD without those agents' knowledge. Real thing. That actually happened, not a joke. During Operation Chaos, the agency engaged in a campaign of, again, illegally spying on American citizens because they were absolutely convinced that these left-wing movements in America must have been sponsored by the Soviet Union or some other dirty communist foreign actor. There was just no way in hell, in the LSD enlightened minds of the CIA, that American citizens could, be against massacring civilians in a war on the other side of the world that had close to nothing to do with us and was only occurring to be a pissing match against the commies. That's inconceivable, right? It just had to be those meddling Ruskies. It just had to be. Well, eventually, it turned out that no, it was not those meddling Ruskies, or any other foreign government for that matter. It turns out that Americans just have common sense. Sometimes. I know, insane for the CIA to comprehend the idea of common sense. How the hell does that help you beat the commies, right? It's just a completely foreign concept for them over there. But, Russian ties or not, the CIA still continued to engage in a massive illegal domestic surveillance program on US citizens within American borders, spying on numerous left-wing groups as well as the Israeli embassy, for some reason, and keeping a ridiculous number of illegally gathered records on American citizens, which they, of course, destroyed immediately after they were informed that they would soon be investigated about them in traditional CIA fashion. Now, was domestic surveillance, this illegal spying on Americans, was that all that the CIA was doing with Operation Chaos? Well, how the f*** would we know? They destroyed all the goddamn documents, like they always do. But I will say that the CIA, not generally known for their straightforward and forthcoming nature on the illegal activities they engage in at all times. Like MK Ultra, for example. They don't like to, tell the full and unadulterated truth about their own crimes against Americans and humanity in general. So just keep that grain of doubt in your mind as to whether spying on these left-wing groups was all they really did, especially when you consider Operation Chaos was working closely with its counterpart here, the FBI's COINTELPRO. Now, in contrast to the CIA, who managed to destroy all evidence relating to Operation Chaos, besides some small amounts that prove their illegal spying operations on these American left-wing groups, the FBI, fortunately for us, did not manage to destroy all their documents, and these surviving documents prove the Fed boys did some way more f***ed up shit in their respective program, COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO was an anagram of Counterintelligence Program, but probably a better way to describe it was a counterinsurgency program. The aims of COINTELPRO were to use informants, undercover agents, and propaganda to discredit American left-wing groups, stoke factionalism within said left-wing groups, and most inflammatory of all, actively promote violence between said left-wing groups, primarily focusing on who they called black nationalists, such as the Black Panther Party. Keep in mind, this was a time where America was very racist. Obama had not yet cured the entire world of racism with his magical black man powers. So the civil rights movement was still in full swing, and the very white establishment that was the FBI at the time didn't like that very much. Did not like that very much. See Martin Luther King as a decent example of that.
The FBI killed Martin Luther King.
The FBI expressly wanted to sow discontent between these groups on the left, so they would basically do their work for them by just gaslighting these left-wing groups so goddamn hard that they'd start just killing each other instead of the FBI doing that themselves, like they did to Martin Luther King. Allegedly, I guess. The feds also used the program to discredit notable civil rights leaders like, again, Martin Luther King, before they, again, straight up killed him, allegedly. Or whatever dumb shit I have to say for legal purposes on that. They allegedly, definitely so obviously did. COINTELPRO relied heavily on covert informants within these left-wing and black nationalist groups who were secretly, snitchily working with the FBI, with many of these informants often being convicted criminals who the FBI would offer to release from jail if they agreed to work with them, infiltrate these left-wing groups, and then do whatever the feds told them that would further their agenda of just generally f***ing with leftists and black people as much as humanly possible, which, does that at all sound familiar to you? Is this ringing any bells for you as far as the SLA and, I don't know, a convicted criminal, Donald DeFreeze, literally walking on his 2 feet out of prison before forming a militant left-wing group and engaging in incredibly suspicious activities such as shooting the first black superintendent in the country, Marcus Foster? Are you seeing what I'm getting at here? Well, before I get at that some more, I'll get some of the most infuriating examples of fuckery caused by the FBI and COINTELPRO out of the way for now, and then I'll move on to how this all ties into Patty Hearst and the SLA. After a black Chicago man by the name of William O'Neill was charged with impersonating a federal officer, stealing a car, and driving it across state lines to infiltrate the Black Panthers Illinois chapter, wonder why he might have been trying to do that, the FBI offered to drop his charges if he agreed to work for them. So, he made a bit of a deal with the devil, if you will. O'Neill soon infiltrated the Black Panthers, eventually becoming the personal bodyguard for the chairman of their Illinois chapter, Fred Hampton. Using this new position, will.i.am sent intel about the group back to the FBI, who determined that the chapter was non-violent and posed no threat to anyone at this time. However, despite their own conclusion that the group was not a threat, after being ordered to send the FBI the floor plan of Fred's apartment, will.i.am was made to slip a barbiturate into the Black Panther chairman's drink, and later that night, the police broke into his apartment and gave him the old Gary Webb treatment by shooting him twice in the head. And this was not at all an isolated incident here, with the author of Chaos again saying, quote, William O'Neill was one of many such informants around the country, and Hampton's death one of many such deaths. Now, in terms of their whole inciting violence campaign, in January of '69, the FBI sent false information to the rivals of the Black Panthers, a group called the US organization, claiming that the Panthers were about to meet on the UCLA campus to plan the assassination of key US officials. So, US members then ambushed 2 Black Panthers on said campus and assassinated them instead, despite the Panthers in reality just being there to attend a rally and not plan assassinations of US members, as the FBI had lied and gaslit the US organization to believe. This would then obviously make the Black Panthers quite pissed, since despite the US members being fooled into thinking that this was a preemptive strike, by doing this, they had in fact fired the first shot at the Panthers, so to speak. All thanks to our friends at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. What are they investigating here, by the way? What happens when they get up to some doesn't really seem in their purview, based on that name, does it? O'Neill said about this event in his book, quote, in the eyes of the FBI, the most desirable outcome had been achieved. 2 Panthers were dead, 3 US gang members were in jail, and the American public was more fearful of black militants. And a 1970 memo from the Los Angeles field office, who were pretty clearly working together with the FBI on this, said about the rivalry, quote, the Los Angeles division is aware of mutually hostile feelings harbored between the organizations, and the first opportunity to capitalize on the situation will be maximized. It is intended that the US Inc. will be appropriately and discreetly advised of the time and location of Black Panther Party activities in order that the 2 organizations might be brought together and thus grant nature the opportunity to take her due course. Yeah. Nature. You know, like when a group of hyenas fight some lions in Africa because the FBI lied to the hyenas saying that the lions were going to assassinate their key officials. It's just natural. Okay, this is just natural stuff we're doing here, people, just as the good Lord intended. No need to worry, nothing to see here. When testifying at the Church Committee, which was the council set up to investigate the many crimes of the FBI and the CIA in the 1970s, a high-ranking FBI official involved in COINTELPRO, William Sullivan, had this to say about the operation. The FBI viewed this carnage as a positive development. Never once did I hear anybody, including myself, raise the question, is this course of action which we have agreed upon lawful? Is it legal? Is it ethical or moral? The one thing we were concerned about was this. Will this course of action work? Will it get us what we want. And finally, let's look at an FBI operation that certainly was not moral, ethical, or legal, the case of Gerard Geronimo Pratt. Pratt was a decorated Vietnam veteran, but he was also a Black Panther, so none of his heroic service in that bullshit war mattered, and generally just him, right? Well, that certainly appeared to be the opinion of the FBI, as they attempted to assassinate Pratt by doing a drive-by of his apartment, shooting through Pratt's windows. But fortunately, as the FBI just sucks at their job so badly, they missed him entirely. After this Fed-sponsored drive-by didn't work, and Pratt was later arrested for a phony murder, the FBI forced a federal informant to lie on the stand and claim that Pratt was involved in said murder, even though the FBI knew, based on their own illegal spying operation on the Black Panther Party, that Pratt was 400 miles away from the scene of the crime when it happened, and that unless he had some sort of f***ing COD kill streak remote missile launcher, it would have been literally impossible, physically impossible, for him to have done the murder. But nonetheless, Pratt ended up being sentenced to life in prison for this crime that they knew he did not commit, and served 27 years behind bars before all the FBI's f***ed up illegal bullshit against him here was revealed during the Church Committee, and Pratt was finally exonerated and set free. And this right here is why I simply cannot support the death penalty. Because I'll look at a monster like Marc Dutroux, for example, see his absolutely heinous crimes, and be like, yes, kill that man. Yes, please. Yummy, yummy in my tummy, end his life immediately. But seeing literal proof that the FBI can just knowingly frame a man for murder and do that, and has done that, and then get him literally killed on death row, hypothetically, that's a no from me, dog. I personally think 1,000 guilty monsters rotting in prison for the rest of their lives instead of getting the death penalty is simply just much, much more preferable than executing even one innocent man that the FBI just literally made an informant lie on the stand to give phony evidence that led to him being convicted of a murder that they knew he did not do. I mean, really, this was an innocent man right here. His only crime was simply being black in the 60s, and he spent 27 years in jail for it. It's up. So that was probably more info about COINTELPRO than you technically needed to know for this particular case, but definitely some necessary information nonetheless, if I've ever heard some. And I think I can say that I have. Like and subscribe. But the big question here is, how does all of this relate to the SLA? Well, like I said, the lifeblood of COINTELPRO was its informants, who were often convicts that they got out of jail under suspicious circumstances so they could infiltrate left-wing groups, and typically ones operating in the San Francisco Bay Area in particular. And so, what if I told you that there was a man named, I don't know, Donald DeFries, that by all accounts was the head of the SLA and was, a convict who got out of jail under suspicious circumstances and then joined a militant left-wing group in the San Francisco Bay Area in particular? Well, it does appear to go a bit deeper than that, but indeed, the main crux of the argument here is that Donald DeFries, much like Charles Manson, even if the two somehow had no actual ties to the FBI or CIA at all, still engaged in a lot of stuff that just so happened to perfectly line up with the goals of the two agencies' secret covert operations that they just so happened to destroy all the documents for before they could be investigated for them. And with that said, let's dig a little deeper. So, the main claims that I dug up regarding the Donald's FBI and CIA connections come from three men: Lake Headley, Dick Russell, and Brad Schreiber. Yes, Schreiber. We're gonna start with the man who somehow has a possibly even funnier name than a man whose parents, for some reason in real life, decided to dub Dick Russell. We're starting with Lake Wellington Headley, a former police detective turned private eye. Real LA noir shit this guy was up to. Vincent Bugliosi, a name you will be familiar with if you're familiar at all with the Manson case, was the chief prosecutor in the Manson trial, and we will have quite a few things to say about him when I eventually do a video on Manson, and he described Headley as, quote, the best private investigator on earth. And just trust me, if Bugliosi is saying that about this man, given his context, It lends a lot of credence to the claims that Headley is going to make here. So after Patty Hearst was kidnapped, the concerned families of 2 SLA members, including the father of one Willie Wolf, which, once again, just some real silly Billy names coming at my face right now. I feel like I'm reading the character sheet to a Dr. Seuss book. But the families of the SLA members contacted Lake Headley, the private detective, to look into this whole situation. And after he wrapped up his investigation, this respected PI, who Vincent Bugliosi called the best private investigator on Earth, filed a sworn affidavit containing over 400 pages of documentation detailing his findings, which included the Donald DeFries's arrest records and disposition of cases, which indicated unusually lenient treatment of DeFries starting in 1967 when he informed on an accomplice who possessed nearly 200 stolen weapons. The detective on this case then moved to a new unit focused on black dissidents such as the Black Panthers. So this proves that DeFries was in fact an informant at some point to a detective that was later moved to a group focused on black dissidents, which certainly sounds quite a bit like just a hint of some COINTELPRO shit there. For certainly. And Lake's conclusion that DeFries was in fact an informant was also later supported by a 1988 book by Ward Churchill and Jim Vander Wall, among plenty of other evidence that we will soon see. Lake's findings also showed that Patty Hearst and her notoriously conservative capitalist parents bitterly disagreed and often argued about Patricia's political beliefs and personal relations before the kidnapping, particularly her personal relations with men of a certain persuasion, namely, black. And that Patty's mother subjected her daughter to extreme pressure to change said personal and political relationships, which, although not directly stated there, would imply that Patty, by disagreeing with her parents' conservative and capitalist ideals, would mean that she already had political leanings that were not unlike the SLA, far before she was ever kidnapped and quote-unquote brainwashed by them. Because, if you're against conservative capitalist ideals, that would kind of mean that you're liberal, left, even a communist, a dirty, dirty communist. Lake's findings also showed that a, quote, love affair between a black man and Patricia Hearst did take place prior to her relationship with her fiancé, Stephen Weed. And most explosive of the findings relating to Patty Hearst from Lake here was that he found that a year before her kidnapping, Patty Hearst had personally visited, in prison, the convict and later head of the SLA, Donald DeFries. A year before her kidnapping. There's also a reason to believe that the black man mentioned, engaged in a love affair with Patty Hearst, was himself Donald DeFries. But again, we'll get into that later. So this is obviously a huge one, right? Showing that the kidnappee already had some pretty direct and intimate contact with her kidnapper an entire calendar year before she was kidnapped. That is more than a bit sus, to say the least. Now, this is big news, huge news, the biggest news, as the adult diaper-wearing orange man might even say. Obama. So, of course, it was a massive story that everyone was talking about, right? Well, actually, it was supposed to be. That is, as Lake's findings here ran in a little-known newspaper, let me know if you've heard of it, the New York Times. But it was a teensy-weensy little bit overshadowed by another story in the paper that day, as Lake's findings happened to publish on May 17th, 1974, the exact same day that 400 police officers got into a fiery shootout that led to the death of DeFries and all other key members of the SLA, which turned out to also be kind of big news, actually, completely turning the story about Lake's findings into yet another casualty of the goldfish-like attention span that is the American news cycle. Which, I mean, that's like if you had a story showing massive collusion between the George Bush administration and Saudi Arabia, which happened to publish on the 11th day of September 2001. There was kind of some bigger things going on in the news that day, you know what I'm saying? But I still haven't told you everything included in Lake's report just yet. More of Lake's findings here showed evidence of links between the CIA themselves and various police departments that were connected to DeFreeze, and that one Colston Westbrook had worked with both the Los Angeles Police Department's Criminal Conspiracy Section and the State of California's Criminal Identification and Investigation Unit, at a time where both of those units were working heavily on black dissident groups, such as the Black Panthers, and at a time that said LAPD was working with a very special informant by the name of Donald DeFreeze. Now, that wouldn't really be an earth-shattering finding, if not for the fact that years later, Colston Westbrook would join the Black Cultural Association and begin working as the outside visitors coordinator for the association's student outreach programs in the California Medical Facility at Vacaville Prison, the same place and the same time that Donald DeFreeze was incarcerated and allegedly experimented on, actually, at that very same facility. DeFreeze participated heavily in said student outreach programs, which connected black prisoners at Vacaville with left-wing students from the San Francisco area, and is a connection brought up in every single article when talking about the formation of the SLA. And not even like just the conspiratorial shit relating to the SLA either. That's literally, this connection is just shown at the start of the goddamn Wikipedia article on the history of the SLA. It is just more open and out there than LBJ's big ol' swinging POTUS penis, all right? And it certainly doesn't hurt that Westbrook had also previously worked in South Vietnam for Pacific Architects and Engineers, a US government contractor for the incredibly f***ed up Phoenix program, which was run by, who else? None other than the CIA. I can feel my head just slowly turning into tinfoil with every passing day that I continue to work on this project. So all of this means that Colston Westbrook, formerly involved with both the CIA and the departments of the LAPD, proven to have worked heavily with the FBI's COINTELPRO and the same departments that DeFreeze himself had also worked for as an informant at the same time as Westbrook years earlier, was now working with DeFreeze in jail through a program that connected DeFreeze to radical left-wing college students from San Francisco. Seriously, I feel like my head is going to explode here. I feel like a real journalist over here today, man. I am honestly proud of my work for once. Bow down before me. Your glorious leader, King Goober, His Excellency, heavenly conveyor of dick jokes, president for life, lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, and conqueror of the British Empire and Africa in general and Uganda in particular. I have finally done it, folks. And that whole rat's nest of connections that I have just diligently untangled in front of your very eyes has led to a theory. A theory that Westbrook recruited DeFreeze at that time in Vacaville during his student outreach program as an informant once again, with the task of keeping tabs on radical left-wing black militants like the Black Panthers who were in prison at the same time as DeFreeze, as well as the radical left-wing college students that DeFreeze now had access to through the Black Cultural Association's student outreach program. Which also, can we take a second to just, like, why was that a thing? Why exactly would they just have students from San Francisco and Berkeley and shit, like all the colleges that they were concerned about these left-wing things going on that Reagan f***ing hated? Why would they have them just go to a prison exclusively to just be connected in some way to specifically black prisoners at that time? Like, how does that make sense in any other context than this conspiratorial shit? And even Lake Headley himself, the so-called best private investigator in the world, and Uganda in particular, eventually agreed to this theory in another book a few years after his findings, which also certainly adds some credibility. Also, Westbrook himself was at that time a graduate student at UC Berkeley, the San Francisco hippie hotbed of left-wing radicals, and he was running the prisoner outreach program for the BCA through that, so he also may have been an informant himself, given his work with the CIA and departments connected to COINTELPRO. It all seems very possible. And it seemed even more possible when Donald DeFreeze started his own study group within the DCA called Unisite, which included one inmate, Thoreau Wheeler, a former Black Panther, and 3 radical left-wing students from Berkeley, Mary Alice Siem, Willie Wolfe, and Russell Little. You may remember Willie Wolfe from such things as being in the SLA, his father later hiring Lake Headley to investigate this whole thing, and having a very funny name. You may remember Russell Little for being in the SLA and later shooting Marcus Foster, and Mary Alice Siem, you probably don't remember because I don't think I've brought her up at all, but also in the SLA. In fact, these were the 3 members who founded the SLA, along with DeFries, following his escape from prison. And someone else who also escaped prison in a totally unrelated incident to DeFries' escape was, wow, would you look at that? Thoreau Wheeler, the same former Black Panther who was in Unisite with DeFries. So obviously, given all this background and the comically easy way that DeFries simply literally walked his way out of prison, people have suggested this escape was set up by the prison so DeFries could go on to infiltrate leftist groups in line with the goals of COINTELPRO. And I'll delve a little deeper into more of the sketchiness regarding his escape when I get to the accusations made by author and funny adult film star name-having individual Dick Russell. So after DeFries and Wheeler escaped and met up with the other 3 Berkeley radicals from his Unisite group, they formed the SLA and got to work doing things that just so happened to line up perfectly with the goals of COINTELPRO and Operation Chaos. Once in San Francisco, DeFries very suddenly came into possession of an immense array of firearms and explosives, including certain very specific, hard-to-acquire items, such as the aforementioned cyanide-filled bullets, and he was known for his, quote, eagerness to sell said items to other Bay Area radical groups. We still don't know how he acquired this massive stash of arms, but according to the theory, they were supplied to DeFries, the known informant, by law enforcement such as the LAPD, FBI, and/or the CIA. And his, quote, eagerness to sell them was allegedly so he could set up sting operations on the radical Bay Area groups that he sold them to. I'll get into how literally everything else they did also lines up with the goals of COINTELPRO and Chaos in a bit, but let's wrap up on Westbrook first. In April of '74, the SLA, for some reason, put that CIA LAPD connected Colston Westbrook on what they called their death list. In their announcement of this, the SLA claimed Westbrook was a CIA agent who had worked as a torturer for the CIA's Phoenix program in Vietnam, that he was also an FBI informant, and that he was a, quote, enemy to be shot on sight. Now, them saying all that may seem a little weird in the context of them, or at least DeFries, also actually being an informant working for the LAPD/FBI/CIA, right? However, it must be noted that they were all killed in a blaze of fire during one of the largest shootouts in U.S. history by more than 400 police officers less than a month after they made this announcement in May. That coincidentally happened the very same day that the damning findings of Lake Headley were published in the New York Times. So, you know, I think there may be a bit of a connection there. Also, how would they even know all of that stuff about Westbrook if they weren't involved with it in some capacity at some point? You know, that's also a bit of a damning detail there, that he's saying that the guy that recruited him for all this shit, Colston Westbrook, was connected to the CIA and FBI and shit. You know what I'm saying? Allegedly fearing that he would be killed by the group, Westbrook did go into hiding soon after this announcement and produced what some would call an explanation for the SLA making all the later proven to be true claims of his CIA, FBI, LAPD ties. Westbrook claimed that the SLA said he was involved with the CIA and FBI and wanted him dead because, quote, lesbians among them objected to his approval of black women in miniskirts attending BCA events, and of him bringing BCA-affiliated prisoners provocative images of said black women. Because, obviously, when a man is cool with miniskirts and gives racy pictures to prisoners, yeah, that obviously means that he works for the CIA, it's indisputable, and should be shot on sight, right? That totally adds up for sure. Nothing to see here, folks. except black women in miniskirts. You can certainly see those if you're in prison. When Westbrook was asked, why he did those things in the first place, he responded, quote, "Because if you want to dangle a carrot in front of the inmates to get them to learn and come to meetings, you don't dangle communism. You dangle fine-looking chicks they'll think maybe they can sit next to." Which, that kind of fair. That is actually kind of a good point, I guess, but it still, again, has literally nothing to do with him being tied to the CIA. So, all right, so that covers the claims made by Lake Hadley, the private eye, and all the context about Westbrook. And now we can move on to the claims made by Dick Russell. And I did not know, getting into this entry, similar to the Mark Dutroux thing, that it would go on for this long and both turn into super long videos just about one entry. I am in the deepest rabbit hole that a rabbit has ever dug, I think, at this point. I don't know what I expected covering a CIA iceberg, but it wasn't quite a collective year and a half of my adult life and like 14 hours worth of content at this point. But hey, that's life. All right. Dick Russell. Russell and Dicks. Here we go. In 1976, author Dick Russell released an article in the Ann Arbor Sun titled "Who Ran the SLA?", in which he tells a narrative he derived from the work of Lake Hadley, the PI, investigator Donald Freed, and the executive director of the Committee to Investigate Political Assassinations, and man whose name just once again sounds like an adult film star, Rusty Rhodes. Rusty's! Wow! The article gets most of its reporting through sworn affidavits taken from prisoners who were inside the clink with DeFries, mostly collected by Rusty. According to these affidavits, the SLA was not created once DeFries escaped prison, but was actually created by the California Department of Corrections itself inside the prison, long before DeFries ever walked straight out of there, before he crip-walked right out the bitch. The article claims that at Vacaville, San Quentin, and Soledad prisons, California Department of Corrections officials recruited certain prisoners as leaders and informants, and told them to recruit more members into this SLA prison gang under them. The purpose of this inner prison SLA, I'll just say the SLA gang, because that's basically how it seemed to operate within the prison, was to basically act as a hit squad, accepting death lists from the guards and carrying out inner prison assassinations, which allegedly mostly targeted, who would have guessed, black dissidents and members of the Black Panthers in particular. After the formation of the SLA gang, the article claims that certain SLA gang leaders like DeFries and Wheeler were allowed to escape so they could go do COINTELPRO type activities against groups like the Panthers outside the prison, and that the whole thing was tied in with the CIA's Operation Chaos as a full-blown assault on left-wing groups like the Panthers, both inside and outside California's prisons. The article states that their findings show, quote, "Clearly, susceptible individuals were pressured, manipulated, and deceived by government agents to undertake a course of action which would, when reflected in the straight media, lead to the association in the public mind of left-wing political activity with violence and terrorism, generating a climate of panic and justifying increased police repression," which is exactly what COINTELPRO and Operation Chaos stated that they wanted to do. And the way that the guards convinced the leaders of the SLA gang, like DeFries, to recruit other prisoners was through threats and promises of reward. Another carrot and stick approach, if you will. One Vacaville inmate talked about what some of these carrots might have been when he was asked about Unisight, DeFries' study group that contained several other SLA leaders, saying, quote, "DeFries' group had it pretty good, which was unusual and somewhat incomprehensible because they really had no security on them. They even had sexual intercourse with female visitors at these Unisight meetings sometimes, and the security guards didn't care," which, that sounds like quite the carrot for a prisoner there, doesn't it? Sex with a human woman, a female, that doesn't often happen in prison. And Dick also claims that one of those Unisight carrots was none other than Patty Hearst herself. He cites Lake Hadley, saying his reports show that Patty began visiting Vacaville in 1972 using the alias and identification papers of Mary Alice Seams, one of the Berkeley student members of Unisight, and that she would frequently visit Vacaville to make hot, sweet Whoopi with Donald DeFreeze sexual style. Soon after all this began, Donald was transferred to Soledad for good behavior, where Patty continued these conjugal visits until DeFreeze escaped and fled to San Francisco. And allegedly, Hearst herself was actually the one who first brought up the concept of kidnapping to DeFreeze, but not the kidnapping of herself, as she suggested that they instead kidnap her two sisters. Now, the article kind of makes the claim that this backfired on Patty and that she herself got kidnapped instead, but I personally think a much more likely scenario is that they instead just staged a fake kidnapping of Patty. Obviously, so that Patty, who according to Lake actually did have radical left-wing views before the kidnapping and a steamy prison trailer sexual relationship with DeFreeze, could escape with the SLA and still have bargaining power over her parents as a supposed kidnapped victim. So just think about that one just for a second. Just let that marinate, because I really think that that's what happened there, given all this evidence. The bitch kidnapped herself. I really think so, man. I really do. No offense to Patty Hearst, if you're watching this, like I said at the beginning, but goddamn, bitch, you kidnapped yourself! Allegedly, don't sue me, allegedly. So that's all we'll cover from Dick. And now on to the third and final man, Brad Schreifer. He, along with multiple other sources of questionable legitimacy, honestly, make quite a bold claim about the SLA, which is that the California Medical Center, where DeFreeze was held, was actually conducting CIA-sponsored MKUltra-style drug-fueled brainwashing experiments on people like DeFreeze to create brainwashed Manchurian Candidate-esque secret agents to use for Operation Chaos to discredit left-wing groups. Now, that is obviously a very bold claim, right? And I'm actually going to delve much deeper into the whole MKUltra brainwashing to create secret agents for fun and profit concept in my next CIA video with the Manson stuff and shit. So for now, just do with that claim what you will. All right. And finally, I want to take a look at what the SLA actually did outside of prison. Now through the lens of all this knowledge about COINTELPRO and Operation Chaos that I've oh so generously bestowed upon you. So think all the way back to their first real crime, the assassination of the first major black superintendent, Marcus Foster. That all seemed weird, right? For a supposed left-wing militia like the SLA to whack that guy? Well, what if I told you that Marcus Foster had known connections to the Black Panthers, which turns out he did. That's what I am telling you right now. So, does that start to make a little bit more sense there? If we suppose that the SLA was indeed a part of Operation Chaos and COINTELPRO, this killing would, 1, take out a prominent civil rights individual with ties to, I guess, their fucking mortal enemy here, the Black Panthers, and 2, make their supposed left-wing militia, the SLA, look like complete fucking goddamn violence-fueled idiots who don't even understand how to carry out their own goals properly. Both of which line up perfectly with the express goals of each operation. And this, despite all the other evidence that I've given you, is probably the biggest thing that convinces me on this whole thing. It convinces me that the group had some kind of connection to the feds. Because the slaying of this guy by a left-wing militia, supposedly black nationalist left-wing militia with no outside influence like they supposedly were, makes literally no f***ing sense at all in any other context than them working for the FBI. In which case, it would make a literally perfect sense, Like so many other conspiracies, you have to really do some mental gymnastics to make things fit up. And with this one, to me, it's like the f***ing opposite. Like, it makes sense that they were tied to the feds, and you would have to do some serious mental f***ery to make it not that. And I mean, think about it. Did the SLA ever actually do anything at all that would make sense for a capitalist-hating, militant, left-wing militia to do? Well, you could say the kidnapping of Patty Hearst, of course, but let's look at that a little closer too. First, the kidnapping, once again, makes the left-wing group look like a bunch of violent thugs kidnapping a well-known, wealthy white woman who went to school at Berkeley. So for Chaos's goals, She's kind of the perfect candidate. Her kidnapping would scare rich white conservatives, further fueling anger toward the left, and you'd assume that they'd hope that it would also scare the college-aged hippies at Berkeley as well, since clearly this SLA group wasn't above kidnapping one of them here. You know, they just did it to a Berkeley student, Patty Hearst, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that this would scare off at least some of those students from becoming dirty Reagan-hating hippies, right? Plus, after they kidnapped Patty Hearst, what did they actually even do with her? I mean, sure, you could say that they used her to blackmail the Hearst family into doing that food program for the poor, but look what happened with that. It was a complete apocalyptic disaster. It not only made the left-wing group look bad, but it made the entire left-wing concept of giving food to the needy look like a dangerous, half-baked pipe dream of an idea that just led to riots, injuries, and theft. So now let's look at their next crime, the robbery of the San Francisco bank. First of all, the group picked the bank specifically because there were a bunch of security cameras there, and they brought Patty Hearst specifically to make a statement, and would cause the robbery to be worldwide news, that she, the kidnapped victim, had been so brainwashed by the dangerous left-wing SLA that she'd rob a goddamn bank while screaming about her name being Tanya, right? So now, that action is basically telling the public, look, these left-wing groups can even brainwash regular, rich, supposedly conservative white women into robbing banks, right? And they put it all on camera for the whole world to see on purpose, if the goal was to strike fear of left-wing groups and make them look like dangerous radicals to the American people, then they certainly checked that box with this one, didn't they? And after this bank robbery, my personal theory is that the CIA and FBI lost control over the SLA around this time, that they'd either gone rogue or the feds decided that their time was up for whatever reason and they needed to be taken care of. I think this because they soon afterward put out that statement exposing Westbrook as a CIA and FBI fella, and then pretty immediately afterward got the hell out of Dodge and fled San Francisco for Los Angeles. Then, again, almost immediately, all just f***ing died in a police firefight that they just happened to have fire trucks on hand at the scene already before the fire even started, that they started by launching an inhuman amount of explosive tear gas canisters through the windows that set the house on fire. And that all of that happened on the same goddamn day that the PI trying to expose all of this, Lake Headley, put out the story calling out all of this sketchy nonsense, right? And I still, once again, never mentioned the final finding of Lake Headley's, which is that in the shootout, he found that at least one of the SLA members was intentionally shot in the back while he was trying to surrender. So, with all of that, remember that this is all technically a theory. There's technically not enough hard proof to definitively make the connection between the SLA, the FBI, and the CIA. But god damn it, wouldn't it make a lot more sense if there was one? It would honestly make so much more sense than if there wasn't a connection there. The whole story, particularly the Marcus Foster part, is just so strange and illogical, really, if you don't look at it through the lens of them being connected to the feds. I mean, how would they even acquire cyanide-filled ammunition of multiple varieties? Well, I can think of a couple of three-letter agencies very comfortable with arming sketchy groups illegally. Just saying. And always remember, kids, if it seems like what I'm saying is just too crazy, too kooky for the CIA to actually be involved in, just think about how crazy and kooky somebody would think that you were if you told them in 1965 that the CIA was kidnapping veterans and prisoners and subjecting them to non-stop LSD torture sessions to try and figure out how to perform literal human mind control. Okay? And they sure did that, provably. That actually happened. So, is any of this really crazier than that?
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
Don't forget to visit rocketmoney.com/necessary-information or click the link in the description to save some money. Seriously, do it. Why wouldn't you do it? Money is good. Go do it now. I'd like to give a very special thanks to my God-tier patrons: Eric W., Cannoli Rose, Mary H., Red D., Bim Wafty, James W., Steffi D., Cameron J., Operator Metro, Chase B., DeAndre M., The Duke of Earl, Shalom L., Arya and Calcifer, and Rena J. And to my extra gracious 20 buckaroos: Mike S., Bonky Donor, Simply Sleepy, Dark Duchess Nia, Tento Mon, Lando Calzone, Terry T., Snagowski, Trent S., Blarg, Fuzzy Viper Shark, Al the Pal, Adam K., Harabutica, and Rare Bees.